On my wedding day, my own father sold me like cattle to the town priest. I already got paid, he said, locking me in that dark storage room. Before you belong to that poor nobody, you're his property. It took me 50 years to be able to tell this story. Hi, my dear ones. How are you all doing? What a joy to have you here with me once again. My name is Mary Reynolds. I'm 73 years old, and I'm here in my simple little house in Asheville, North Carolina. I was born in Boone, also here in our beautiful state, but life brought me here many years ago, and this is where I put down my roots. You know what I was doing just a little while ago, before sitting down to talk with you? I was finishing up a crochet blanket. Oh, my children, you can't imagine how crochet has become my passion. I make blankets, table runners, coasters, everything with these hands that have been through so much in life. I started doing crochet after I turned 50, can you believe it? It was my daughter-in-law, Teresa, who taught me. She saw that I was very lonely at home, the kids all grown up, and one day she showed up here with a hook and a ball of light blue yarn. "Miss Mary," she said, "you're going to learn crochet with me. You'll see how good it is to keep your hands and mind busy." At first I resisted, said I was too old to learn something new. But she insisted, and today I'm so grateful. My grandchildren love the little blankets I make for their rooms. The youngest, little Pete, 7 years old, always asks me to make little crocheted animals. Last week I finished a little yellow puppy for him. From where I'm sitting, I can see my little backyard through the window panes. I planted some rose bushes there that are so beautiful, and I have a tangerine tree that produces the sweetest fruit. When tangerine season comes, I make preserves and share them with the neighbors. It's a joy to see their happiness. I'm sitting here in my regular armchair, the one my oldest son gave me when he got married. It's dark brown, a bit faded now, but so comfortable I can't even explain. Next to me, I have my little table with the radio. I like to listen to old songs while I do crochet, and always a thermos with hot coffee. Before I continue, I wanted to make a special request to you who are listening. If you like my story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales. Okay? That way you help me reach more people who might need to hear what I have to share. And turn on the notification bell too, because every week I have a new story to share with you. And you, my dear ones who are watching me now, tell me here in the comments. From which little town are you watching me? And what time of day did you find this video? In the morning with coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take some time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, will you? Let's create a chain of love. You know, my children, today I want to share with you a very difficult story from my life. It's about the day that should have been the happiest of my youth, my wedding day, but which turned into one of the worst experiences a woman can go through. It was the day I discovered that my own father was capable of selling me like I was an animal. For a long time, I kept this pain in my chest, didn't tell almost anyone. But now, at 73 years old, I feel it's time to speak. Maybe my story can help other women who went through similar situations or alert other families. Because unfortunately, what happened to me still happens out there. So get comfortable there, grab some coffee, and come with me on this journey. I'm going to tell everything from the beginning, from when I was a little girl in Boone, dreaming of love and never imagining that my own flesh and blood would be capable of betraying me in the worst possible way. Oh, my dear ones, when I close my eyes and think about my childhood in Boone, I can still smell the wood burning in my mother's wood stove, Geraldine. What a hard-working woman she was. She'd get up at 5 in the morning every day, light the fire, make coffee, and still take care of us 4 children with a patience I only came to understand when I became a mother too. Our house was tiny, wooden, with only 3 rooms. In the living room were 2 wicker chairs that my father, Anthony, had won in a bet, one of the few times he won anything betting. My parents' bedroom was separated from ours by a flowered curtain that Mama had sewn. I shared a bed with my younger sister, Darlene, who was 2 years younger than me. My brothers, Oscar and Arthur, slept on a mattress on the floor. The backyard was big, full of chickens running here and there. Mama raised about 20 chickens, and it was my job to collect the eggs every afternoon after school. We had a vegetable garden too, where she planted collards, lettuce, tomatoes, and always some corn stalks. It was a humble life, but in my childhood memory, it seemed like nothing essential was missing. My mother, Geraldine, was a saint. Thin, always in a dress and apron, hair pulled back in a simple bun. She worked washing clothes for others. The wealthier ladies of Boone would bring their fine clothes for her to wash and iron. I remember her standing at the wash tub, scrubbing clothes on the washboard, always humming a church song. She was very religious, took us to Mass every Sunday at Sacred Heart Church, which was downtown. Daddy Anthony was quite different. A tall, thin man, always with that unshaven beard, somewhat messy hair. He worked at Mr. Joaquin Ferreira's sawmill, but it wasn't steady work, you know. Sometimes he'd go weeks without working, and Mama would worry about the bills. I, small as I was, didn't fully understand, but I saw there was always a shortage of money at home. Daddy's problem was his addiction. Every Friday when he got his paycheck, he'd go straight to Joe's bar near the train station. He played cards, dominoes, bet on cockfights. When he came home, he'd usually already lost half the money. Mama never fought in front of us, but I'd hear the quiet arguments in their bedroom after we were already in bed. "Anthony, the children need new shoes," she'd whisper. "Woman, next time I'll win it all back. I'm sure I'm going to turn things around." He'd always reply the same thing. But that turnaround never came. On the contrary, things only got worse. I saw how he looked at me and my siblings sometimes, especially when someone came to the door asking for money. It was a strange look, like he was calculating something. At the time, I didn't understand, but today I know he saw us as a future investment. My games were simple, typical of a country child. Darlene and I played house under the tangerine tree in the back of the yard. We made little meals with mud and leaves, pretending we were great housewives. We had a rag doll that Mama made with scraps, named Rosie. She was our daughter in the games. At school, which was about 6 blocks from home, I was a good student. I really liked to read when I could borrow a book from the teacher, Miss Olinda. My favorite subject was English. I dreamed of being a teacher when I grew up, teaching other children to read and write. Mama always encouraged my studies, said that education was the only real inheritance she could leave me. My school friends were Zelda, the shoemaker's daughter, and little Gerald, son of Mrs. Conception, who sold pies at the farmer's market. The 3 of us were inseparable. After school, when I finished my chores at home, we'd play tag in the church square, or sit on the sidewalk talking, making up stories about the adults who passed by. Boone back then was a small town. Everyone knew everyone. Houses didn't have high walls like nowadays. Neighbors talked over wooden fences. Early in the morning, the baker would pass by on his bicycle shouting, "Fresh bread!" And in the afternoon, Mr. Manuel would come selling vegetables from a cart pulled by a gentle donkey. But even in this simplicity, I already noticed that my father was different from other fathers. My friends' fathers worked steadily, came home on time, played with their kids on Sundays. Daddy Anthony always seemed to be scheming something, always with that look of someone calculating the value of things, even of us, his own children. I remember once, I must have been about 8 years old, when a very well-dressed man came to the house in a suit and tie. They talked quietly on the porch, and Daddy kept looking at me in a way that gave me chills. Later, I found out the man wanted a girl to work at his house, take care of his young children. Daddy almost agreed to hand me over, but Mama got in the middle and said I was too young. "The girl needs to study, Anthony. She's not going to be anyone's maid," she said firmly. It was one of the few times I saw Mama directly confront Daddy. He got irritated, grumbled something about lost money, but didn't insist. At that moment, I didn't fully understand what was happening, but a little seed of fear was planted in my heart. It was as if I were merchandise that my father was evaluating, waiting for the best moment to sell. And as I grew up, this feeling only increased. Daddy started talking about my future in a way that made me uncomfortable. "This girl is going to bring a lot of money to the family," he'd tell his friends when they came to play cards at our house. "Look what a beautiful young lady she's becoming." That's how I lived my childhood in Boone, between my mother's protective love and the feeling that, in my father's eyes, I was just another way for him to get the money he always lost gambling. When I turned 16, my dear ones, it was as if I had blossomed overnight. Mama always said I took after her when she was young. Light brown hair, big eyes, a smile that lit up my face even on the hardest days. And it was precisely at this time that I met Joseph, the man who would completely change my life, although not in the way I imagined. I was coming back from Sunday Mass, walking down Flower Street with Darlene and Mama, when I saw a tall, dark-haired young man with jet-black hair, combed with brilliantine, talking to Mr. Manuel at the store entrance. He wore a well-pressed white shirt and dark pants, but you could tell they weren't expensive clothes. Still, he had an elegant way of carrying himself, you know? When our eyes met, I felt my heart race in a way I had never felt before. "Who is that young man there, Mr. Manuel?" I asked the storekeeper after Mama went inside to buy sugar. "Ah, that's Joseph Smith, girl. He arrived from Marion last week, working at Colonel Augustus's farm, out toward the highway. Hard-working young man, that one. Every day he stops here to buy bread for lunch." Joseph was 22 years old, worked from dawn to dusk in the fields, took care of cattle and helped with the corn crop. He was an orphan, raised by an aunt who died when he turned 18. That's why he'd left Marion, looking for a better life in Boone. He lived in a simple boarding house run by Mrs. Sebastian near the train station. For 3 weeks, I'd make up excuses to pass by Mr. Manuel's store at the time Joseph usually showed up. I'd pretend I needed to buy needles for Mama, or that I'd forgotten to get salt, anything, until one day he greeted me. "Good morning, miss. You always pass by here at this time." I turned red as a beet, but managed to respond. "Good morning. It's that I help my mother with the household shopping." "What a hard-working family, then. My name is Joseph Smith. And you, miss?" "Mary Reynolds." From that day on, we started talking whenever we met. He'd tell me about work on the farm, about how he dreamed of having his own piece of land someday. I'd talk about my studies, about my dream of being a teacher. Joseph listened to everything with attention, as if my words were the most important thing in the world. After 2 months of these casual meetings, he took courage. "Mary, I would very much like to ask your father's permission to court you. Of course, if you'd want that too." My heart jumped with joy, but soon came fear. "Joseph, my father is he's a difficult man. He doesn't like suitors hanging around the house. But I'm a hard-working, honest man. I don't have much money, but I have dignity. I'll talk to him with all respect." The following Friday, Joseph showed up at our house in the late afternoon. Daddy was sitting on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette after dinner. Mama called me inside the house, but I stayed listening to everything through the half-open window. "Good evening, Mr. Anthony. My name is Joseph Smith. I came here to ask permission to court your daughter, Mary." Daddy didn't even get up from his chair. He looked Joseph up and down with that look of disdain I knew well. "Oh, is that so? And what do you do for a living, boy?" "I work at Colonel Augustus's farm, sir. I take care of cattle, help with planting. It's honest work." "Employee work, right? A tall drink of water like you will never be able to properly support a family. My daughter deserves better than a poor nobody like you." Joseph swallowed hard, but maintained his respectful posture. "Sir, I know I'm not rich, but I'm a hard worker. I plan to prosper, have my own land, and I truly love your daughter." Daddy gave a dry, cruel laugh. "Love? What nonsense! Love doesn't fill bellies, boy. My daughter is beautiful. She can get a man with means, someone who's actually worth something. You're useless, a nobody. Get out of here and don't come back." I felt my heart breaking into pieces, seeing Joseph leave our house with his head down. I ran to my room and cried until I had no more tears. Mama came to comfort me, ran her hand through my hair like she did when I was little. Daughter, your father is sometimes too harsh, but he wants what's best for you. No, Mama. He doesn't want what's best for me. He wants whatever brings him the most money, I replied between sobs. During the following months, Joseph tried to meet me other times, always with great respect and distance. We'd talk briefly after Mass or when I went to get water at the public well. He told me he wouldn't give up on me, that he'd wait as long as necessary. And I fell more in love every day with that simple man with a pure heart. Daddy noticed we kept meeting and became furious. He started watching me, would send Darlene to accompany me everywhere. This girl isn't going to ruin my plans because of some poor nobody, he'd grumble. What plans were those? At the time I didn't know, but today I understand that Daddy was already scheming something to use me as a bargaining chip. He had high gambling debts, people asking for money at our door almost every day. And I, at 17 years old, beautiful and innocent, was the only thing of value he had to offer. It was then that something happened that left me completely confused. One Saturday morning, Daddy came home with a strange smile on his face. He called Mama to talk in the kitchen, and soon after, she came to talk to me with her eyes shining with joy. Mary, my daughter, your father changed his mind about Joseph. He said you two can date properly, and if it works out, even get married. I couldn't believe what I heard. Mama, are you sure? Daddy really said that? He did. He said he thought it over, that Joseph seems to be a hard-working young man, and that you're both young. You can build a life together. I was euphoric, but also suspicious. I knew my father too well to believe in such a sudden change of heart. Something wasn't right. Daddy never did anything without self-interest, and this sudden generosity gave me a chill. But the joy of being able to officially date Joseph was stronger than any suspicion. That same afternoon, he came to our house and Daddy received him with a fake smile and honeyed words. Joseph, my boy, I thought better about our conversation. You seem like a good young man, hard-working. You can date my Mary, yes. Joseph was surprised but happy. He shook Daddy's hand with gratitude. Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. I promise I'll take good care of Mary. I'm sure you will, Daddy replied, with that smile I now know belonged to someone planning something terrible. For 3 months, Joseph and I dated officially. He'd come to the house on Sunday afternoons, sit with us on the porch, talk respectfully with Mama, and even with Daddy. We talked about marriage, dreamed about our life together. Joseph had gotten a promotion at the farm and was saving money to rent a simple little house for the two of us. But I noticed how Daddy looked at me during these visits. It was a calculating look, as if he were evaluating merchandise. And sometimes I'd see him talking quietly with strange men on the porch, always when Joseph wasn't around. Well-dressed men who arrived in carriages and spoke in whispers. What I didn't know, my dear ones, is that Daddy had already closed a much more lucrative deal for him than simply marrying off his daughter to a farm worker. He had sold me to the man who should have been the holiest in our town, Father Sylvester of Sacred Heart Parish. And my wedding day would be the day of delivery of the merchandise. March 15th, 1970, should have been the happiest day of my life, my dear ones. I had just turned 18, and I was finally going to marry Joseph. Mama had sewn my wedding dress with so much care. It was simple white fabric, but she embroidered small flowers on the hem and made delicate lace at the neckline. It wasn't a princess dress, but to me, it was the most beautiful in the world. I woke up at dawn that Saturday, with my heart beating hard from nerves and happiness. Mama was already awake too, making coffee and arranging the last details. Darlene, who was going to be my maid of honor, was as excited as I was. Even Daddy seemed to be in a good mood, whistling while he shaved in the backyard. Today is your big day, my daughter, he told me at breakfast, with a smile that at the time I thought was affectionate. But today I know was the smile of someone about to complete a very lucrative deal. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning at Sacred Heart Church. Joseph had managed to save enough money to pay for the church wedding, and still have a little left over to start our life together. He had rented a small house on Commerce Street with 2 rooms and a little backyard where I could plant herbs. Around 8 o'clock, Mama's friends started arriving to help me get ready. Mrs. Kitty brought red lipstick that she said would enhance my lips, and Mrs. Eulalia lent me a necklace of tiny pearls she had received at her wedding. It was pure joy in our little house, everyone talking at once, giving me advice on how to be a good wife. When it was time to go to church, I looked beautiful. The dress fell perfectly on my body. My hair was pulled back in a low bun with some natural flowers that Darlene had picked in our yard. In the mirror, I saw a young woman in love, full of dreams and hopes. We walked to the church. It was tradition to go on foot, with all the family and neighbor ladies accompanying me, singing wedding songs. The neighborhood children ran alongside us, throwing flower petals. I felt like a queen. When we arrived at the church, my heart raced when I saw Joseph waiting for me at the altar. He looked handsome, in a borrowed but well-pressed suit, carefully combed hair, and that smile that made me fall in love every day. The guests, who weren't many, but were the people we loved, were all there, waiting for our ceremony. But it was at this moment that everything changed, my dear ones. It was at this moment that my life turned into a nightmare. Daddy grabbed my arm when I was about to start walking to the altar. "Wait a minute, Mary. Father Sylvester asked us to go to the church storage room before the ceremony. He needs to bless the rings and sign some papers away from the commotion. It'll just be a minute." I thought it was strange, but didn't question it. He was my father, and the priest was a respected authority. Why would I doubt? We went down a side corridor of the church to a heavy wooden door that led to the storage room where they kept the sacristy objects. "You go in first, girl. I'll call the priest," Daddy said, gently pushing me into the room. The storage room was a dark place, smelling of mold and dust. It had shelves full of old candlesticks, saint statues, stacked altar cloths. A small window let in only a thread of light. I stood there waiting, adjusting my dress so it wouldn't wrinkle. It was then that I heard the key turning in the lock from outside. "Daddy? Daddy, why did you lock the door?" I shouted, running to try to open it. But the door was locked from the outside, and no matter how much I knocked and called, no one answered. Minutes later, I heard the key turning again. My heart jumped. Finally, they were going to get me out of there. But when the door opened, who came in wasn't my father. It was Father Sylvester, except he wasn't wearing his usual cassock. He was in regular clothes, white shirt and dark pants, and had in his eyes something that made me tremble from head to toe. It wasn't the holy look of a priest. It was the look of a hungry wolf looking at a defenseless sheep. "Where are the rings, Father, and the papers?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm, but my throat was as dry as paper. He locked the door again, this time from the inside, and put the key in his pocket. When he turned to me, he had a smile that made me nauseous. "There are no rings to bless, my dear. And the only paper that interests me is the receipt your father already signed." "Receipt? What receipt? I don't understand." "Of course you don't understand, poor thing. Your father didn't tell you that you were sold? That he received a very good amount to deliver the merchandise to me before she married that tall nobody out there?" The world spun around me. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the wall so I wouldn't fall. "Sold? What are you talking about?" "Your father owed a lot of money to a lot of people, Mary, and I offered a solution. Pay all his debts in exchange for some special moments with the prettiest daughter in Boone. Before you dirty yourself with that poor nobody out there, you're going to be mine." At that moment, my dear ones, I understood the dimension of the betrayal. My own father had sold me like I was livestock. He had planned everything. The consent for the courtship, the wedding preparations. It was all just an act to deliver me to the buyer at the right time. "Please, Father, this can't be happening. You're a man of God." "God also created the pleasures of the flesh, my child. And I've been watching you grow up, become a woman. Today is my day to reap what I've planted. He started approaching, and I backed up until I was pressed against the back wall. The wedding dress that minutes before was my pride now seemed like a sacrificial garment. I was trapped, betrayed by my own blood, handed over as an offering to a monster disguised as a saint. "Don't scream," he said, getting closer. "Your father explained to everyone that the ceremony will take a little while. We have enough time to complete our business." That's when the worst moment of my life began, my dear ones. There, in that dark and dirty storage room, with the sound of the church organ beginning to play outside, that man tried to steal from me the purity I was saving for my husband. He tried to do things to me that a proper young lady didn't even know existed. I fought like a wild animal. I scratched, kicked, bit, screamed until my throat was raw. The wedding dress tore in the struggle. The flowers from my hair scattered across the dirty floor. He called me horrible names, said I was an offering that had already been paid for, that I had to accept my fate. But I didn't accept, no. Even though he was stronger, even though the situation seemed hopeless, something inside me refused to surrender. Maybe it was the love I felt for Joseph. Maybe it was the anger at my father's betrayal. But I fought with a strength I didn't know I had. And it was at this moment of total desperation, when I no longer had the strength to resist, that I heard a noise at the door. A noise of something hitting the wood very hard. Someone was trying to break down the storage room door. Someone had heard me scream. Someone was coming to save me. The sound at the door got louder, more desperate. It was as if someone were throwing themselves against the wood with their own body. Father Sylvester stopped what he was doing and looked at the door with anger and fear in his eyes. His hands trembled as he tried to compose himself, smooth his wrinkled clothes. "Who's there?" he shouted, trying to sound authoritative, but I heard the tremor in his voice. It was the voice of a man who knew he'd been discovered in the middle of his filth. "Mary! Mary! Are you in there?" It was Joseph's voice, hoarse with desperation and fury. "I know you're in there! I heard you screaming! I heard your voice!" My heart almost jumped out of my mouth when I heard my fiancé calling me. Hope returned like a light in the middle of darkness. I tried to respond, but my voice was weak, broken from so much screaming. "Joseph! Joseph! Get me out of here! He... The words refused to come out. How to explain what was happening in there? How to tell that my own father had sold me like a head of cattle? A terrible crash echoed through the storage room. Joseph had thrown himself against the door with a force I didn't know he had. The wood shook, creaked, but didn't give way completely. The priest went pale as a ghost, let me go and started fixing his clothes hurriedly, sweating cold. "You whore. You can't tell anyone anything," he hissed in my ear, trying to intimidate me one last time. "Your father already got the money. You've already been sold. This deal is done." But at that moment, my dear ones, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't just my father's betrayal. It wasn't just the violence I'd just suffered. It was the certainty that if I didn't do something right there in that instant, I would be lost forever. That disgusting man would keep using me whenever he wanted, and my father would keep selling me like cattle whenever he needed money for gambling. It was the terrible awareness that I wasn't a person in the eyes of my family's men. I was merchandise. An object of value that could be negotiated, sold, delivered to the highest bidder. And if I didn't fight there, at that moment, I would accept that fate for the rest of my life. It was the last straw. It was the moment I understood I had hit rock bottom and that either I climbed up or I drowned. Another crash. This time stronger, and I heard the wood crack and groan under the impact. Joseph was breaking down the door with brute force, moved by a love and fury that transformed my gentle fiancé into a savage warrior. "Get out of the way!" he bellowed with a voice I'd never heard before. It was the voice of a man maddened with rage. "Get out of the way because I'm going to break down this door, even if I die trying." I could hear other voices from outside now. Our wedding guests were arriving, alerted by the noise. I heard my mother's voice shouting my name, heard Mr. Manuel saying something about calling the sheriff. On the third attempt, Joseph took more distance and threw himself against the door with all his body weight. The noise was like thunder. The upper hinge gave way completely and the door burst open in an explosion of splintered wood. Joseph entered like a hurricane, with bloodshot eyes, his wedding suit all wrinkled and dirty, his hair disheveled. When he saw the scene, me on the dirty floor of the storage room, wedding dress torn, hair messed up, crying and trembling, and the priest trying to compose himself as if nothing had happened, his eyes turned red with pure hatred. "You bastard! You damned son of a bitch!" Joseph threw himself on Father Sylvester with a violence I had never seen before. "What did you do to her? What did you do to my bride?" The fight was terrible, my dear ones. The man my father called tall nobody, poor nobody, and weakling was beating the town priest with punches so hard that I could hear the dry sound of fists hitting that monster's face. The priest tried to defend himself, screamed that he was religious authority, that he would excommunicate everyone, that this was sacrilege, but Joseph was possessed with holy fury. "Authority nothing! You're a demon, a child abuser!" Joseph shouted between the punches he distributed. "How dare you touch my Mary? How dare you abuse an innocent bride on her wedding day?" The priest tried to fight back once, but Joseph was much stronger and was driven by a rage that gave him the strength of 10 men. Each punch was a declaration of love. Each blow was a promise that no one would hurt me again while he was alive. It was then that other people arrived. The noise of the door being broken down and the fight had caught the attention of half the world, and our wedding guests came running down the church corridor. My mother was the first to enter, and when she saw me in that state, sitting on the dirty floor, dress torn, crying convulsively, she fell to her knees crying as if someone had killed her child. "My daughter, my dear little daughter, what did they do to you? What evil is this?" Soon after came Sheriff John Baptist, who had been at Mass waiting for the ceremony to begin, and some other important people from town, Dr. Aristotle, the pharmacist Mr. Valdesir, the teacher Miss Kitty. When they saw the scene, they understood everything immediately. It wasn't hard to deduce what had happened there in that storage room. The priest was arrested in the act, still bleeding from the punches Joseph had given him, the cassock he had hastily put on all dirty with blood and dust. When he tried to deny it, make up some excuse, say it was all just a misunderstanding, I found strength I didn't know I had, and spoke the truth in front of everyone, with a voice that came from deep in my soul. My father sold me to him. My own father received money and delivered me as if I were a cow in the corral. He said he'd already received payment. The silence that fell at that moment was sepulchral. Everyone looked around looking for my father, but he had disappeared like smoke. He had taken the dirty money and fled like the coward he always was, leaving behind the family and daughter he had just sacrificed on the altar of greed. In the days that followed, my dear ones, I entered a state I don't even know how to describe. It was as if my soul had left my body and was floating on the ceiling, watching myself from above, trying to understand how my life had turned into that hell in a matter of minutes. Joseph tried to comfort me, sat by my side in bed for hours, held my hand, whispered words of affection. Mama didn't leave my side, brought chamomile tea, tried to get me to eat something, combed my hair carefully. But I was like a ghost walking through the house. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that disgusting man's face. I couldn't even cry properly. It was as if I had lost the ability to feel anything. Worst of all was the shame I carried like a weight on my chest. In small towns like Boone, everyone finds out about everything very quickly. And even knowing I was the victim, I felt as if I had a red mark on my forehead, as if everyone who passed me on the street was thinking about what had happened to me, imagining details, making judgments. Some neighbor ladies would come to the house pretending concern, but I saw in their eyes that morbid curiosity, that desire to know more details of my disgrace so they could comment later in their circle of friends. It was a second violence, more subtle, but equally painful. Sheriff John Baptist was very respectful to me during my statement. He explained that the priest would be tried and probably convicted, that the crime had happened in front of witnesses, and that justice would be done. But that it would take time, months, maybe years. And meanwhile, I would have to live with the looks, with the whispers, with the malicious comments from some people. It was at this time that I tried to make my first, more formal complaint. I went to the house of the town judge, Dr. Aristotle, to tell the whole truth about the sale my father had made. I wanted justice not only against the priest, but against my own father, who had treated me like merchandise. I wanted him to be prosecuted, arrested, to pay for what he did. But when I arrived at the doctor's house, I discovered something that left me even more desperate. He was my father's buddy. He had baptized Darlene when she was a baby. He was a regular at Joe's bar, where Daddy used to play cards and bet on dominoes. "Look, Mary," he said, with a condescending tone that made me nauseous, shuffling some papers on the desk without even really looking at me. "I understand your anger, but your father has already fled the city. Nobody knows where he is. There's no point in stirring up this sad story. The priest has already been arrested. He's already paying for what he did. Now it's better for you to forget this nonsense and try to move on with your life." "Forget?" I replied, feeling a revolt rise up my throat like bitter bile. "How am I going to forget that my own father sold me, that he handed me over to be violated on my wedding day? Girl, these things happen in poor families. The important thing is that you didn't lose that you can still marry Joseph properly. Forget this idea of pursuing your father. It'll only bring more shame to your family, more malicious comments in town." I left the judge's house feeling dirtier and more humiliated than when I left the church storage room. It was as if the entire world of powerful men had united to silence me, to make me swallow the humiliation and move forward as if nothing had happened. As if I didn't even have the right to anger, to justice, to indignation. That night, lying in my bed, looking at the dark ceiling while listening to my mother whisper prayers in the next room, I felt I had reached my lowest point. It was as if I were at the bottom of an immense well, with no rope to climb up, no light to guide me, no hope of seeing the sun again. It was then that I had a dream, my dear ones. A dream that changed everything, that gave me back hope when I no longer believed in anything. I dreamed of my grandmother Odette, who had died when I was 8 years old. She appeared to me dressed in white, with that sweet smile and those clear eyes I remembered from childhood, when she'd hold me and tell stories of warrior princesses. "Mary, my dear granddaughter," she said with that gentle voice that used to calm me when I was little, "you're not going to let yourself be defeated by these evil men. You have warrior blood in your veins. Your great-grandmother faced gunslingers and colonels, your grandmother faced poverty and disease, and you're going to face this situation too. But not alone, my child. Never alone. Grandma, I don't know what to do anymore. Everyone abandons me. Everyone betrays me. Look for Sister Leopoldine at St. Joseph's Church. She arrived in town recently from the state capital. She's a true woman of God who fights for the weak and oppressed. She'll help you find the path to justice." I woke up with my heart beating hard and a clarity in my mind I hadn't felt in days. Sister Leopoldine. She was a nun who had arrived in town recently from Raleigh. Everyone commented that she was different from the other religious women, that she defended the poor and oppressed, that she wasn't afraid to confront the powerful when it came to protecting the defenseless. There, at that moment, my secret plan was born. I was going to look for Sister Leopoldine and tell her everything, not only what had happened to me, but the entire network of corruption and complicity that allowed men like my father to sell their daughters and men like the priest to abuse families' trust. It was my only hope. It was my last thread of light in that total darkness that had become my life. The next day, I would wait for Joseph to leave for work, tell Mama I was going shopping downtown, and go to St. Joseph's church to look for my salvation. I was going to bet all my chips on this woman of faith who might be the only person in town capable of helping me find a way back to dignity. The morning after my dream about Grandma Odette, I woke up for the first time in weeks with a little bit of determination in my chest, my dear ones. It was as if a small flame had lit inside me after so much time in the dark. Joseph had left early for work at the farm. He now worked double shifts trying to save money and get me out of Boone soon, away from the looks and comments of the town. "Mama, I'm going for a little walk downtown to clear my head," I told Geraldine, who was hanging clothes in the yard. "Maybe I'll stop by Mr. Valdecier's pharmacy, buy some medicine for my headache." She looked at me with those tired eyes, still swollen from crying so much for me. "Go carefully, my daughter. And don't take too long, okay?" I walked through the streets of Boone, feeling the looks following me, some of pity, others of curiosity. But this time, instead of shrinking with shame, I kept my head up. I had a mission, a purpose. I was going to look for my salvation. St. Joseph's Church was on the other side of town, on a quieter little street, away from the downtown bustle. It was smaller than Sacred Heart Church, simpler, but had a different peace about it. When I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the silence enveloped me like a hug. Sister Leopoldine was kneeling in front of the altar, praying. She was a woman of about 40 years old, taller than the other nuns I knew, with a serene but firm face. When she saw me enter, she got up and came to meet me with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, my child. I'm Sister Leopoldine. You're not Mary Reynolds?" My heart raced. She knew who I was, knew my story. "You know what happened to me?" "I do, dear. And I also know you're suffering a lot. Come, let's sit there on the bench and talk calmly." We sat together on the wooden bench in the first row, and for the first time since my wedding day, I felt safe to speak. I told her everything: my father's sale, the priest's abuse, Daddy's escape with the money, the humiliation at the judge's house, everything. I spoke between tears I could no longer hold back. She listened to me in silence, holding my hand, and when I finished, her eyes shone with holy indignation. "Mary, what happened to you is a terrible crime, and it cannot go unpunished. I came from Raleigh precisely to help women like you, who suffer at the hands of powerful men who think they can do whatever they want. But sister, the town judge is my father's buddy. The sheriff is even a good person, but he can only arrest who's here, and my father disappeared into the world. My child, there's a higher instance than this little town's justice. I have contacts in the capital. I know prosecutors and judges who aren't involved in this web of cronyism and corruption. We're going to file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office." My heart leapt with hope, but soon came fear. "Do you think they'll listen to me? I'm just a poor girl from the countryside." "Dear, I've been working for 15 years defending women's rights. I have a network of contacts that includes lawyers, social workers, other nuns. You're not alone. We'll go to Raleigh together, and I guarantee your voice will be heard." In the following days, Sister Leopoldine worked like a warrior preparing my case. She collected statements from witnesses, people who had seen strange men visiting my house, neighbors who had heard arguments about money, even Mr. Manuel from the store, who confirmed seeing my father celebrating after receiving a large amount of unknown origin. "What your father did has a name in law: human trafficking," she explained to me while we organized documents on a church table. "And the priest committed not only attempted rape, but also conspiracy for sexual exploitation. These are federal crimes." 2 weeks later, we were on the train to Raleigh. It was the first time I'd left Boone, and as sad as the situation was, I felt a strange freedom watching the landscape pass by the train car window. It was as if each mile distanced me not only from my town, but from the version of me that had been sold like cattle. In the capital, Sister Leopoldine first took me to her friend's house, Dr. Ivonette Macedo, a lawyer who specialized in cases of violence against women. She was an elegant woman, about 50 years old, who received me with a maternal affection that made me cry with gratitude. "Mary, dear, what happened to you is revolting, but unfortunately it's not rare," she told me, serving hot tea in a delicate porcelain cup. "I know dozens of similar cases. Fathers who sell daughters to settle debts, religious authorities who abuse families' trust. The difference is that now we have legal instruments to fight this." The next day, we went to the public prosecutor's office. Prosecutor Dr. Gumersindo Silva received me with seriousness and respect, listened to my whole story without interrupting me, made detailed notes. When I finished, he pounded his fist on the desk hard. "This is inadmissible. We're going to open a public civil inquiry and request search and seizure of your father's entire contact network. If he's a fugitive, we'll issue a national arrest warrant. And as for the priest, we're going to request transfer of the case to the Capital District, where there's no local influence." For the first time in months, I felt that justice could actually exist. It was no longer an empty word. It was real people, really working to help me. But Sister Leopoldine didn't stop there. She took me to a support house for women victims of violence, where I met other young women who had been through situations similar to mine. It was at the same time sad and liberating to know I wasn't alone, that my pain wasn't unique. "Mary," said one of them, Zelda, a young woman from Charlotte who had been sold by her stepfather. "At first we think it's our fault, that we really are merchandise. But here we learn we're people, that we have rights." During the 3 days I spent in Raleigh, my world opened up. I met strong women, lawyers, social workers, other nuns who dedicated their lives to helping victims like me. Sister Leopoldine introduced me to a psychologist, Dr. Hortensia, who explained that the trauma I carried had treatment, that it was possible to heal the wounds of the soul. "You're going to need time and patience with yourself," she told me during our conversation, "but with adequate support, you can rebuild your life and be happy." On the last day, before we returned to Boone, I received news that changed everything. Dr. Gumersindo had managed to track down my father. He was in Charlotte, working at the port docks, thinking he was safe, far from Boone's justice. "Tomorrow the arrest warrant goes out," the prosecutor informed me. "Your father will answer to justice for what he did. And more, we managed to freeze a bank account where he deposited part of the money he received. That money will be returned to you as compensation." When the train arrived back in Boone, I was no longer the same Mary who had left there 3 days before. I had my head held high, my heart full of hope, and for the first time since my wedding day, I believed in a different future. Joseph was waiting for me at the station, anxious and worried. When he saw me get off the train with Sister Leopoldine, he ran to meet me. "Mary, how are you? What happened in the Capitol?" I held his hands and looked into his eyes with new firmness. "Joseph, my love, real justice exists. And we're going to start our new life away from here, away from these rotten men, in a city where no one will judge us for what happened." "Are you sure about this?" "I am. And more than that, my father will pay for what he did. Justice will be done." It was true. 15 days later, we received the news. Anthony Reynolds had been arrested in Charlotte and would be tried for the crimes of human trafficking and conspiracy. Father Sylvester would also be tried in the Capital District, far from Boone's cronyism. For the first time since that terrible day at church, I smiled for real. The girl who had been sold like cattle was dead. In her place, a woman was born who knew how to fight for her rights, who had found her voice and her strength. And all of this thanks to a courageous nun who taught me that even in the darkest moments, there's always a light waiting to be found. There's always someone willing to extend a hand to those who need it. And here I am today, my dear ones, at 73 years old, sitting in my armchair in Asheville, telling this story I kept in my chest for so many years. I look around and see a life I never imagined possible in those dark days in Boone. After we returned from the Capitol and justice began to be served, Joseph and I decided to start our life away from all that. With the money from the compensation we managed to recover from my father, plus the savings Joseph had accumulated, we bought 2 bus tickets and came to Asheville in December 1970. It was a bigger city than Boone, where nobody knew our story, where we could just be Joseph and Mary, a young couple in search of a new beginning. Joseph got a job on a farm here in the outskirts, and I started working as a seamstress, making clothes for others. We rented a simple little house in the Santa Helena neighborhood, tiny but ours. That's where our first son was born in 1972, little Oscar, today a 53-year-old man who works as a mechanic and lives nearby with his family. 2 years later came Conception, my only daughter, who today is a teacher at the municipal school. And in 1977, the youngest was born, my Arthur, who followed in his father's footsteps and works in farming. All three gave me wonderful grandchildren. There are 7 in all, between 7 and 25 years old. Little Pete, who I mentioned at the beginning, is Conception's son. That boy is the light of my life. Every weekend he comes to sleep over here, and we do crochet together. He makes some crooked little squares, but with so much affection that I keep them all in a special box. Joseph passed away 3 years ago, my dear ones. He was a good man until the last day, loved and respected me for all those 50 years of marriage we had. Never, not even once, did he charge me or make me feel less of a woman because of what I went through. On the contrary, he always said I was the bravest woman he knew, that I had become stronger after everything. "Mary," he used to say, holding my hand, "you turned pain into strength. That's why our children grew up knowing how to defend themselves, knowing what's right and wrong." And it's true. I raised my children telling the truth about life, teaching that women aren't the property of any man, that a family worth its salt protects the weakest instead of selling them. Conception grew up knowing she had a voice and rights, and today she teaches that to her students. My boys learn to respect women, to protect those who need it. Today my routine is simple and happy. I wake up early, make my very strong black coffee, sit here in the armchair and start the day's crochet, listening to the news on the radio. In the morning, I take care of the yard plants. These rose bushes you should be seeing through the window, I planted with my own hands 15 years ago. The tangerine tree bears fruit every year, and I make preserves to distribute to the neighbors. 3 times a week, Teresa, my daughter-in-law, comes to my house and we do crochet together. She was the one who taught me, as I told you at the beginning. Today, I've already taught several women here in the neighborhood. We get together on Thursday afternoons at Mrs. Normelia's house and stay there talking and doing our work. It's quite a therapy. I sell my blankets and tablecloths at the little market in the central square every Saturday. It's not a lot of money, but it's mine, earned with my own work. With this small income, I buy my materials and still have some change left over to buy presents for my grandchildren on their birthdays. Sunday is family day. My children and grandchildren come to have lunch here at home. I make spaghetti with homemade sauce, sausage stuffing, garden salad. The table gets full, noisy, happy. The older grandchildren help serve, the little ones run around the yard. It's in these moments that I feel my heart overflow with gratitude. Sometimes when I'm alone here at night doing crochet, I think about everything I went through. I remember the 18-year-old girl who was betrayed by her own father, who was almost destroyed by men's evil. And then I look around, this house that's mine, this family I built, this peace I conquered, and I give thanks. I give thanks for Sister Leopoldine, who saved me when I needed it most. I give thanks for Joseph, who truly loved me. I give thanks for my children, who gave me the joy of being a mother and grandmother. I even give thanks for the pain I went through because it taught me to value every moment of happiness. My father died in prison in 1985, never having asked for forgiveness. The priest served 15 years in prison and then was expelled from the church. Justice was done, as Sister Leopoldine had promised. I don't feel anger toward them anymore. I feel pity. Pity for men who wasted their lives doing evil while I used mine to build good. Today, when some neighbor lady comes to my house crying because her husband beats her, or when a mother comes to me worried about her teenage daughter, I listen, welcome, guide. I teach that there's always a way out, there's always someone willing to help. I tell my story when I need to show that it's possible to start over. That's how I live my 73 years here in Asheville, in peace, in gratitude, surrounded by true love. Life taught me that the size of the darkness we face doesn't matter. There's always a light waiting to be found. There's always a chance to start over. And if you who are listening to me have gone through, or know someone who went through something similar, remember, you are much stronger than you imagine, and you are never, never alone. My dear ones, coming to the end of my story, I want to leave a message for you who might be going through similar situations or know someone who is suffering. First, never accept being treated like merchandise. It doesn't matter if it's father, husband, stepfather, or any man, nobody has the right to sell, hurt, or abuse you. You are people, you have dignity, you have rights that nobody can take away. Second, there's always a way out, even when it seems there isn't. I thought I was going to die in that storage room, that I would never get justice. But Sister Leopoldine appeared. Good people willing to help appeared. In any country, anywhere in the world, there are authorities and organizations ready to protect those who need it. Seek help. Don't stay silent. I learned firsthand that pain can become strength. That betrayal can teach us to value those who are loyal. That fear can transform into courage when we decide not to accept the unacceptable anymore. That a girl sold like cattle can become a free woman, loving mother, and happy grandmother. I learned that a real family protects, doesn't sell. That true love respects, doesn't hurt. That justice takes time, but always comes for those who don't give up fighting. And I learned that God never abandons those who suffer. He sends angels like Sister Leopoldine at the right time. If you know any woman being sold, abused, or mistreated, don't just watch. Extend your hand. Be the light she needs to get out of the darkness. Human dignity has no nationality. It's a universal value that we all must defend. For you who are parents, protect your children as the most precious thing you have. Never, under any circumstances, use them to solve money problems or addictions. Children aren't investments. They're human beings who deserve love, care, and protection. And for you, my daughters and sons who are listening to me and went through similar traumas, look at me today. I'm 73 years old. I have a beautiful family, a life in peace. What happened to me didn't define me. I defined myself by how I reacted to it. You too can rebuild your lives, can be happy, can find people who truly love you. Life taught me that we are much stronger than we imagine. That after the storm always comes the calm. That all darkness has an end, and a new day always dawns. My dear ones who followed my story to the end, you gave me an enormous gift by listening to this grandma. If the story touched your heart, I ask, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and turn on the notification bell right now. It's important that more people hear these stories so that situations like this don't repeat themselves. Share with those you think need to hear it. And leave here in the comments just the word justice. That way I know you stayed until the end and understood the message. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Let's spread this chain of awareness and protection for our women. May God bless each one of you, and remember, there's always hope. There's always a new beginning. There's always love waiting for you. A kiss on each of your hearts.